themselves too. So I'm Jenny Gravitt, and I am the chair of Standards and Assessment and from District 4. I'm also a junior high teacher, which is very important.
Scott Hansen, District 2, that's Ogden and Weber area.
Janet Cannon, District 8, Granite District and Murray District.
John Collins, I support Diana Sudworth in teaching and learning.
Welcome, John.
And us online.
Yeah.
And people at 11 o'clock Saturday morning.
Oh, my turn. I'm sorry. Lisa Cummins, District 11, Mama 5, troublemaker, you know.
Yeah. And I'm Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement.
Okay. Why don't we go around here, and if there's something people want to speak on, if you'll let me know, and then we can make sure you get a chance to speak on.
Jenny Earl, District 1, and I just wanted to address a couple of things on the standards, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Recommendations.
Diana Sudworth, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Linda Hanks, GMAP School Board Member and representing USBE.
Is there anything you're here specifically for, or just
Not
the whole
specifically, so I'll just listen,
Okay.
and then if there's something...
Make sure you pop your hand up if you need to.
I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks.
Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning, Utah State Board of Education.
Hi, I'm Rich Young with Pearson.
Jody Collins, I'm the Health and PE Specialist.
Jolie Honey, I'm the STEM Coordinator.
Like you, Scott, Science Specialist, Teaching and Learning.
Gina James with the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools.
Anything specific? Okay.
Hi, Brian Questenberry, Legal Counsel.
Well, we're in great company. So let's go ahead and start off with action item 8.1, which is the standard revision process. If you remember from our last meeting in January and December, we discussed amending the revision process, and we as a committee talked about, adding some web-based meetings, and then in our board meeting, we even changed that again. So I believe, Diana, you're going to come up to the table and talk us through that. There's 4 options, and I would love for you to talk to us about each option and give us your insight.
Okay. I took all of the things that you all talked about and tried to think of different ways to approach it. So if none of these 4 options work, maybe you could...
You really shouldn't give us that option, Diana. Yeah, bad idea.
Okay, I take that back then.
Okay.
You must choose one of these 4. So the first option is the status quo. So the way that the item 9 and the full standards revision process is available for you in Board Docs too. But the way number 9 reads right now is public review, including review by any applicable advisory committees to the board with monthly brief updates to the board. So last month when we were talking, we talked a lot about having web-based meetings. So option 2 is public review, including at least one web-based meeting designed to receive input with Utah resident authentication and review by any applicable advisory committees to the board with monthly brief updates. So that just really adds the web piece. Option 3, when you got into more detail, that's where option 3 came from. So that would include 3 web-based meetings designed to receive input and 3 geographically dispersed in-person meetings and review by any applicable advisory committees. The same as the rest is the same. Option 4 is what we actually recommend, which is that we would make a change to 8 as well, so that we would submit draft standards and public review proposal to the board, so that when we came with the draft standards, we would also come with a proposal, and then number 9 then stays the way that it currently is. Mm-hmm. The reason that we like number 4 the best is because what we've noticed is the public input varies widely depending on what subject we're talking about. So when it's health and when it's science, people come out in droves. When it's PE and driver's ed, our specialists are sitting in Vernal all by themselves. Yeah. And so option 4 kind of leaves some flexibility in the process and still gives you the opportunity to say, yep, that'll work.
Yeah, and as long as we're meeting statute, which is just 3. Okay.
Right.
Are there any questions? Janet?
Yeah. So I was reading these about the option 3 web-based meetings and 3 geographically dispersed in-person meetings. I thought those geographically dispersed meetings were in statute. Is that
public?
correct?
3 geographic. Well, it doesn't say geographically diverse, but 3 public meetings that would be face-to-face would meet the statute. Yeah.
Okay, so in whatever option we choose, those 3 meetings would by law be a part of the process. And so I guess the question is, to you, which is most beneficial to you, or can you tell between a web-based meeting and a
I think we would love to answer that question in 2 months?
Yeah, we don't know yet.
We've never done a web-based meeting, so right now we don't know how much participation we'll have. We don't know if it'll be more or less. So when Ricky finishes, it would be great if a part of Ricky's final report to you included some information about how those meetings went.
Which maybe is part of the argument for option 4, because there's some things we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Anybody else for questions?
What if we looked at a modified option 4 that just put in some information about the minimum requirement, because we do have the 3 public meetings, and maybe one of those being a web-based or an online meeting, because that brings in people from everywhere.
That would be a 4th meeting, because statute requires three public meetings.
So a web-based meeting doesn't qualify as a public meeting?
Is that right?
It doesn't say
where's Brian?
I would think that would be the most public.
I don't think it does.
I don't think it says it.
Don't know.
I don't.
It has to be public.
Yeah.
So maybe we're fine.
If we can do a virtual meeting as one of those, and that helps us with the geographic part of it, we could even hold one of those and one at USD, or one here at USBE, and then one, for the minimum requirement, and one somewhere else in the state.
And
that would maybe give us some guidance for the standards that don't have as much public, don't create as much public fervor. Is that statutorily, if that's okay, that would be my idea on that.
Again, that kind of ties the hands. So when the specialist came and said, "Here's my proposal," seems like the time. Also, keeping it more open like this, like we wouldn't have even been talking about a web-based meeting 5 years ago, because there just wasn't the technology to pull it off the way that we can today. And so this would also leave it open for holographic meetings. I don't know.
Careful, now we're getting into fake news stuff, and we're going to have a whole new standards on that.
That's great.
It's really my intent to kind of tie the hands so that we don't have to keep having this discussion, so that we kind of have a basic setup.
Except that I will add, what happens is we have the discussion anyway, because as we learn more information, I mean, just something to think about. Because I think the 3 meetings in statute is certain, but anyway.
So, and I guess I'd just like our attorneys to take a look at that and see if a web-based meeting would qualify.
Yeah, I'm looking at the open public
definition
of a meeting to see if it includes. And I think it does. So that's what I'm trying to.
Because that might simplify things a bit and bring us more current.
That's right.
If we can tie the board meetings by phone, then I think that's without limitation. If we participate by phones, then I think we can do that.
I think the other place to look is where the meetings are set up, and I don't know that reference right now, but where the public meetings are required for this particular purpose, just to make sure it doesn't say in-person public meeting in that statute.
Has anyone found that?
I need my computer, I'm sorry.
Are there any other questions for Diana or more discussion?
Yes, if I may.
Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
She was looking at me, I'm like, okay.
I'm like, I know you have something to say.
I know. Okay, so if I'm going to move a little bit off the standard revision process, keep to the 3, add the 4, I think, for experimental purposes. That's what I would say. But at least meet statute, right? Beyond that, I was wondering if we could add another process or an additional process where we have more view of the drafts themselves, right? I like submit draft standards and see in public review. Is that prior to it being open to the public? When you come to the board with monthly brief updates, would draft written standards submitted to board members be appropriate? So that we're up to date on what's being talked about, what standards have been looked at, instead of you know, because I can go to a private meeting like I did with Rick and Jolene, and you know, and talk about the standards one-on-one. But if board members as a whole, as a committee, have an update, okay, this is what has been looked at so far. This is what is, you know. So we have an eye on the ball instead of having that 1 week prior, and then.
And so.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and answer, and then I just want to bring it back to that. Go ahead.
Okay. So I would say there aren't draft standards in between. So during the 90 days, when the specialist is getting the information,
right,
how they feed that to their writing committees and what that process is also different for the different specialists, and dependent on how much they have. So it's not like, oh, there's a 30-day draft, and then there's a 60-day draft, and then there's a 90-day draft. There's just going to be a draft. And then let me remind you, you can take as much time as you want. So when that final comes and they say, okay, here's our final draft, if it's not to your liking, you can send it back and say, okay, we need more time on that, and we want you, like you as the committee could have some motions that say, oh, we want this standard changed or whatever, and then you could direct the. So how much time you take is really up to you.
Okay, so then maybe can I suggest instead of the brief updates to expand? To expand the brief updates to include subject matter that have been discussed.
Okay,
is that still?
Can we just no? Hold that thought.
Yes,
we learned a couple of things, and I would really like us to maybe kind of focus on the 4 options before we move there, if that's okay. So kind of wrap that up. 2 things. Patty found the statute, and you can expand on this, but it's 3 different regions, and go ahead and read that.
It says that it has to conduct 3 public hearings that are held in different regions of the state on the draft core standards for Utah Public Schools. That's it.
And then Brian looked up, and it can include electronic meetings. So with option...
Next question, though.
Okay, go ahead.
So are we in a diverse region if we have a public meeting that originates from here, and then we hold another meeting in Salt Lake?
I think
we would
do that.
I think we would need to have them in different regions.
But why?
Well, I don't know. I just feels like the right thing to do.
Because it says geographically diverse.
Yeah, because it's in statute.
The online meeting would be certainly geographically
different
diverse,
regions.
Right?
Yeah. So one of the things, if I may interject, Chair, when we're talking about held in different regions, it doesn't talk about equity of access. So if they will all be online, we have to realize there are some people who don't have access to technology.
Yeah.
And so that would be one thing to consider with the technological use of those things. So,
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up.
Yeah.
So what is the advantage of having online as opposed to just putting out a survey?
That's my question. And I don't know that we know yet.
Because it seems like it's the same, unless they're interacting with each other or somebody else. It's just like a survey, right?
Well, if I may.
Go ahead.
I've heard that even with this last survey with the health standards, that there was a lot of confusion, and they couldn't express they couldn't express what they wanted. Well, we said email, but I don't know that they've emailed. That there was, I think, a lot more. Was there call-ins? Was there a lot of call-ins or no? Because we told them
Jody,
to call in.
Come up to the table.
Jody, yes.
Speak.
Yes. What worked?
I didn't at least see, maybe 2-3 calls.
Okay, what about emails?
I have an entire folder of emails.
Like the number being 1,500? Hundreds, okay, as opposed to the survey.
1,357.
Oh my goodness.
The survey is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well then that's the ones of the people that came to me.
And I guess with option 4, it would give us the option of doing online or 3 different places. So it would kind of meet everybody's needs, because it could go more. It could be just some staff. Jody?
And some of the survey responses are quite long and very detailed.
Okay.
They listed out several standards. Some of them even revise the standards. They say how they would rather it worded.
Okay.
They're quite detailed.
Okay. Well, then you solved that problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can just interject with something that staff has brought up before the 4 options are chosen, because there's the 4 options here. But then if we can have a conversation about the brief updates to the board after there's a discussion.
Yes, I would like to do that. I would like to decide, like, do we have a motion for which option we prefer? And then after that, we can discuss, like, the review process. Jenna?
I'll make a motion that we adopt option 4 for the standards revision process amendments.
Okay, the motion is that we adopt option 4 in the standards revision process. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Me. Yeah, I'll be opposed.
One opposed. Okay, so now we can move to the second part of this one, where it's the standards board, standards revision process for Utah State Board of Education. And Patty, you had something to say about that.
So, before we move on, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is this going to the full board?
Yes, right?
Okay, so do we need
So
to make a
how would
motion
I-
that this goes to the full board?
Well,
for
it just says
action?
approve a process for core academic standards revision.
So are we doing that? Do we? And I don't know, because I haven't been on standards before. Diana, does that usually just our decision as a committee, and it doesn't go to the board?
It goes to.
It would have to go to the board.
It just doesn't
I
say
guess
it
my,
here, but-
my question would be, do you want me to prepare this with the new, what you just chose?
Yes.
And the full board doesn't get all the options?
No.
They just get
The
what
option
you
four.
just approved?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Okay. But then we'll need to make a separate motion for this next part if there's any changes, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, Patty.
Upon looking, and this is feedback or discussion for all of the board members, one of the things that staff recognized in doing the brief monthly feedbacks is there was a tendency for there to be response bias in administering the survey. And the response bias that came was in the monthly updates themselves. So whatever was brought before the committee is then what was publicized in the newspaper the next day and what we received hundreds of emails on following. So it can happen in 2 different ways. If we bring something here to the board and we say there's 2 things that, and I'll just be overly general. It has nothing to do with any content area. There's something to do with cats and there's something to do with dogs. Okay? So that's in the paper, and then that's what every email comes in on about cats and dogs, which then the survey results and then all the feedback becomes very skewed. And people tend to not look at the entirety of the rest of the standard. So because of this implementation bias in administering the survey and providing the feedback on a monthly basis, then we do get that bias in survey results, and we stop getting the complexity of all the work that's gone into the entire standards revision process or standards update process. So staff is asking that we have a discussion in here amongst you board members to say, is that truly the intention, or do we want to have an update on the number and locations who attended and that type of thing. So there's some confusion just because of the results that are coming in, and then the lack of anyone looking at the rest of the core standards because of the survey bias, the implementation.
Yeah, so I would love to hear that discussion because they're coming to report to us, and are we asking for specific information, which then biases, because the point is to receive information, not to influence information. So
to move this along, maybe I could start our discussion with the motion.
Okay,
a
great.
Motion that we limit the monthly brief updates to number of people attending, number of comments, modality of the comments, so that we have the board has a sense of what kind of activity is being generated, but not receive any specific information about those comments until the end of the 90-day period. So that would be the motion for us to discuss.
Okay, so make sure I say this right.
If I can let us be clear that we can individually as board members come to this staff and get that information. Okay.
So before we discuss, the motion before the board is to have the reports, those who are reporting, they report on number of people, how the meetings are going in general.
So location,
the
mode that the comments are coming into, that will help us.
It's maybe effectiveness, because we want to look at the web base. John, did you get that? Okay. So is there discussion on that? Do you guys agree with that?
I agree.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, Diane?
Clarifying question. So do you want me to have number 7 reflect that, or is that just a motion that is understood? Like, do you actually want to change in this document?
I mean, I don't know what you guys think. I don't know that we need to. I mean, I guess brief updates, maybe you could say brief updates about location, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't think we need to.
I mean, I don't know that we do, but
just leave it. Yeah,
unless
it's probably cleaner to leave it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you also like to know what board member Earl was here for?
Oh,
because she felt like she had to leave.
Sure.
So she would like you to consider number 6, meet with the SRC to provide updates and receive input, and that the SRC would submit feedback to the board. The review committee that met initially too. So the process starts with the 10 parents and the 7 experts. And so what she would like to see is that I think we should talk to her more, because I'm trying to think there's nothing to, on number 6, there's nothing to submit feedback on.
Because also, until you get all of the feedback, it feels like you shouldn't, in some ways, be deciding which direction to go.
But that's our job.
Do they do anything after that? Why would we continue to give them update if their work is done?
The way that the process is right now, their work is done when they send their recommendations to you in number 3.
Right. So I don't understand why they would still be involved at all after their work is done.
Do you understand why they would want to be involved? Okay.
So you're saying strike.
I just wanted to see if you could help us understand.
But that's what I say as I read it. There's nothing to have feedback on, because in number 5, the revision recommendations and to the board kind of like there's no draft or anything yet.
So the flow, if I understand it, is the Standards Review Committee meets, they put together the draft of the standard or the places they want to change. Is that what happens? It's initial recommendations?
They have initial recommendations, but their recommendations are very broad. They're things like, should the standards be reviewed or revised or not? What documents should they keep in mind? Are there any particular content pieces? But they don't go into a lot of detail. They're actually very broad. The specialist then works with that committee to create a document that comes to you, and then you give direction to the specialist that says, yes, use these documents, make these changes, do these things. And then the specialist disappears for like 9 months, and they work on these. And every once in a while they come back, and they might, especially if they're having a problem deciding something. And then they would come back, and then they come with the draft. And then if you approve, the draft goes out for 90 days, which is where we are right now with science.
Stop for a second. Before we get to that point, I'm looking at number 6, and this says that there is some kind of a recommendation that's created. This is before then the new standard is drafted at all, that we right now need to go back with the SRC and provide updates and receive input?
So that is currently done through email. So our specialists, as they let the SRC know, oh, the board is meeting on this, or oh, here's a public draft. I mean, they keep them in the loop, but not, like they're not seeing drafts that you're not seeing. It's more a matter of, hey, we're going through the process, and you might want to look at these public documents.
And so this input that we're receiving, is it whether we're meeting the recommendations, the initial recommendations of the SRC? Is that what they're giving us feedback on? Or
the input is going from the SRC to the specialists. It's not coming back to you. And I don't actually know that we've had a lot of input from the SRC. It's mostly a matter of thank you. Yeah, I mean, those two would know what their SRC is.
So the SRC just kind of gets us started, gives us a push, and then that's it. Or no training.
I don't know if we even need number 6.
I know.
So just strike. That's what I'm after. I mean, is that 6 even a value-added step in the process?
Would that be a problem to strike number 6, or like what do you guys see?
Any?
Do you see any problems with that?
Are we going to offend the people on the SRC if we don't go back and talk to them again?
I would say that our specialists are professionals enough that they wouldn't cut them out of the process, even if it wasn't there. I think they would do exactly what they're doing, even without that step.
I want to be careful and make sure that Jenny has her concerns met first before we strike it out.
Right. And can you help us understand
text her.
They wrote down here.
Yeah.
Did she
Read
say?
what you wrote.
What she said is that in number 6, she wanted to add and submit feedback to the board.
Oh, so to get their response in
To
writing.
actually get the response in writing back to the board.
she
So
wanted it to
far,
be
it would
both-
be
she wanted
nothing
it to be
because it's been
bolstered,
pretty
though.
yes.
She wants to build that
Yeah.
up, and we're talking about
Eliminating
taking it out.
Yeah, I just don't see
But
the.
could I ask Jody and Ricky if that has even, like, what does that look like for you guys?
Should I come?
Sure, please.
Sorry. Ricky Scott, teaching and learning science. Its location is what's hard.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a draft yet. It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense to get their specific feedback on
Yeah.
a draft, potentially. But just to get feedback along the process and how things are going. If you remember those kind of, for those that were here,
Yeah.
those are very generic feedbacks as well. Like, here's how we've met, here's the kind of things we're seeing, here's where we're going, but it's all still really blurry until the draft comes out.
And so, did anything happen for you at number 6, really?
No, not really at all. I don't know.
Jody?
Hi, Jody Kaufman again. So the most I've got from the 17 members is thank you.
Oh, that's nice.
And
Is Leanne here?
It's just not far enough
Linda,
along.
have you seen Leanne tonight?
So, does the SRC get a draft
Seen
of
Leanne Wood.
when the
She's
board
been
gets
on a
it
lot
for the
of
90-day review?
so for me in science, so as soon as the draft is adopted and everything gets updated, the first group I send it to is the Standards Review Committee. Here's the draft, it's been adopted, it's open for a 90-day review.
This afternoon.
Please use, because there's no system in place for them to give specific feedback, but I always invite it. If you'd like to give me, like, there's no place on the survey to be like, I was a Standards Review Committee member. So
Yeah.
if you have specific feedback, let us know. But here's the online tools, here's when the hearings are going to be. And that's the first email I sent. Then I usually use that same email with some changes to get it out to curriculum directors and leaders all over the place to kind of just spread the word.
And I'm ignorant on this. Does this Standards Review Committee actually meet as a committee to do this work in the beginning?
Yes.
Right now, do they meet together at step number 6?
And that, yes, they do. Oh, sorry, in step 6.
I was going to say,
Sorry.
Jody says no.
Just-
Sorry.
Yeah,
I
We're all
answered
shaking our
26.
heads.
So, in the beginning, yes, and so these people come from all over the state sometimes. So I mean, it's a pretty big ordeal to get schedules together and get them in one room. And so from that point, we just say, if you'd like to, let us know if we can meet. But right now, we'll try to do everything electronically. So
Darren's gone out to look for Leanne Wood because she's been on
Oh.
these committees.
Yeah.
And so I think it might be good for her to weigh in if we have time to
Okay. Well,
hear
and I
from
guess
her and see, because she would probably give
yeah,
us
that
some
would be
insight
good.
on whether it would be
And did
useful
you
or
have
not.
something?
I'll just say, if we do it on a local level, we usually gather the input from the various locations and then bring it back and discuss it and make changes as the staff would recommend.
But it sounds like if we were to do what Board Member Earl wanted, we would just be reporting words like "thank you." I mean, it wouldn't be that much to report.
Unless
Did you
we
get a response from her?
reconvened them and had
Unless
them.
they actually
Yeah,
send
unless
it
yes,
Formal
yes.
assessment.
And would that would cost money, and would it be worth the?
What kind of, sorry to interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
What kind of input would be beneficiary from us at this point?
Yeah.
Nothing?
I'm not sure I understand the question. At this point in the process, or at this point
By
in
asking
the
board members?
No, in the SRC. So if the SRC comes back and makes initial recommendations, would they want to hear from us about what more resources they look at, what our concerns are? Would they want that kind of input?
They're not doing the writing, so when the SRC gives their report, then that's not what the specialist does. What the specialist does is what you tell them to do based on that report. So you might remember, those of you who were here, that there was a big discussion about whether NGSS and whether or not, because the committee said use NGSS, and there are board members who don't like NGSS, and so the conversation was should they or should they not, and you voted and said yes, use NGSS. If that vote had gone the other way, then even though the Standards Review Committee said use NGSS, we would not have used it because we do what you tell us to do. So the purpose of the Standards Review Committee is, again, to give those great big general things. And I'll just add that when the committee put this together probably 3-4 years ago, because this was revised this has been revised several times, probably every time there's a new board. But it originally, the same conversation was had about what should the SRC, what should the role be later, and it was decided that like every other member of the public, the individual members of the SRC should give public comment through the portals, attend the meetings, that kind of thing. But there wasn't any reason why their opinion should matter any more than any other member of the public. That's what the board decided a few years ago. So it was like they've done their job in those 2 meetings, and then now it's your job to shepherd the process through.
Okay, so go ahead.
So given that, I was just looking at the way this is structured. We could move SRC down here to 9, where it says any applicable advisory committees to the board, including the SRC, with monthly brief up.
SRC isn't.
It could go in there if we wanted them to give us some feedback. But if we don't want them to give feedback, where it is now, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to me. But if we do want that feedback, wouldn't that be the place to get it?
She's not here. Okay. She's not here.
That it's true what you're saying, because there's not going to be there's no action taken.
Right.
So it's just meet and provide input, but there's no action. So with no action, then it's just a statement being made.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's down here, it could be SRC. On number 9, we were actually going to write the word access committee in there, and so then it was determined by the board to put applicable advisory committees to the board. So there could be something in there.
Just including SRC.
Yeah, but then also it's inclusive of public review, including. So I mean, there's lots of people we could include. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if it's like
it's just a nod to the SRC, just so they helped us in the beginning. Now we want to know.
So is it important to have the writing? So if the SRC's recommendations aren't met through the writing committee, is that applicable then?
Or I can't imagine how that would happen unless the board had said, don't do what the SRC said. When you tell the specialists, these are the things you do, those are the things they do.
When the SRC is done, is that when they just disband and don't need any more after what? Because it's in statute what they do, right, Diana?
Yes.
It's in statute what they do. And so if we're going to add more responsibilities to them, that would be above and beyond what's in statute. It seems a little weird to me.
I agree.
So I think we should look and see what's in statute and see. Sorry, Patty. And see, because if they're SRC isn't a group that's together all the time. I mean, they come together for just this one purpose, and then they're done.
Yeah.
And then we put another one together, and then they're done. And then we put another one together, and they're done. So if they're done, there really isn't one there to get input from. Do you know what I'm saying?
So
they're done.
Right. So just a quick question, and then or not question, comment. So I think the purpose of the SRC in the first place is what? To provide a framework. Right? Am I right in saying that? What's the purpose of the
standard? I can read it from statute. Okay. So in statute it says the State Board of Education shall annually report to the Education Interim Committee on the development and implementation of the core standards for Utah Public Schools, including the timeline established for the review of the core standards for Utah Public Schools by a standards review committee, and the recommendations of a standards review committee established under section 53E-4-203.
So the purpose of that is... sorry.
Yeah.
Say just a minute, don't say anything else.
There's more that talks about the makeup of the committee.
Well, it's 4-203, yes. Yeah. So the makeup of the committee, and that one is 53E-4 Part 2, or -203. It says subject to a timeline for the review of standards, and then it lists the areas. A separate standards review committee for each subject area specified in subsection 2A. Let me just kind of get to some of the meat of it. At least 1 year before the board takes formal action to adopt new core standards for Utah Public Schools, the board shall establish a standards review committee as required by this section. A standards review committee shall meet at least twice during the time period described in subsection. So it is twice. In establishing a timeline for the review of core standards for Utah Public Schools by a standards review committee, the board shall give priority to establishing a standards review committee to review and recommend revisions to the mathematics core standards for Utah Public Schools, and then it goes to the membership of the committee. And the board shall provide staff to support the committee, and they're not to receive any compensation, and it should make people successful. And so I can keep reading while you guys discuss to see if there's something else within that.
Yeah, does it say what their purpose is or how long they serve or anything like that?
No, well, the only thing that it says is to establish a standard, to review and recommend revisions to, and it actually only calls out the mathematics course standards for Utah Public Schools. I don't know why it only calls out.
It called them out first because that statute was written at a time when there was a lot of attention on the math core and the common core. And so math was called out.
Yeah, you're right.
But that's already been done.
You're right.
So so that part doesn't matter.
So but they meet twice in a year before we can take any action.
Yeah, but what my understanding is what they do is they get together and look at the current standards and say, do these need to be updated? And then they make a decision and they come to us and say yes or no or whatever.
And then we decide either to accept their recommendations or not.
Yeah,
so I'm not sure why they would come back.
Okay, so they are a checks and balance. From what I understand, the reason why they've been put into place, it's the same as the parent review committee for the SAGE test. It's the same as they become a checks and a balance outside of the entity here. So usually there's parents associated with that. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Okay, because that becomes a checks and balance element. But there's also, why would they make a review and why would they make recommendations and then not be able to look at those recommendations later? Because they are that checks and balance element, is what I'm saying. And what I would suggest is on 6, that it's saying here even that they're providing updates or they get the feedback, but they actually submit something. They already submitted something once before, right? They submitted their recommendations, which we accepted, right? So like on health standards, we accepted those, correct?
Do they make specific recommendations? Do they say standard number da-da-da-da needs to be changed? Standard, or do they just generally say the health standards need to be updated?
Because I've read the recommendations. You guys approved the recommendations, right? And I'm sure the same thing happened with science, right? So there were recommendations made, and you guys approved those. Well, maybe.
They made recommendations.
Yeah, and so it all it does is become that second checks and balance. You finished, you did your work, and the standards. Oh, I'm not going to say it right. The standards review committee then. All it is a review of what took place, and then
so then I would, if I may,
go ahead.
So then I would say, okay, Jenny referred to the parent committee. Well, the parent committee hasn't really succeeded in doing what it should have been doing. I would argue, and that I've been pushing for the math standards to be looked at and reviewed, and there's been so much pushback, and I'm not the only one trying to do this, and I'm not hearing support in having a standards review committee come back and say, should the math standards be looked at, right? I'm getting so much pushback, we don't have money, we don't have this, and I'm trying to get us there, but there's so much pushback because I'm a voice. So, so is the SRC relevant? Our board members, that's our job, is to look at standards, to know what standards are, to know the needs are in the process and everything. So where is our role? Are we just deferring to everybody else?
Looking at the statute, but it says, I'm leaving 11 in that 53 4-203. And it just says the board shall take into consideration the comments and recommendations of the standards review committee in adopting the core standards. So that's the extent of the statutory requirement to interface with the SRC. It doesn't give them, I think we're giving them more authority if we're having them come back and approve what we've done. I'm
not saying approval, but it's maybe a review of what.
But they also have the ability to come in as members of the public afterwards and say, hey, I was on the standards committee, and guess what? You guys are going in a different direction than we thought.
They can do that survey.
They just have one voice, so they're not an approval. They're a member of the public.
So
and I think statutorily, that's the way I see their role. It's a recommend role in the beginning, and then we do our job, and then they can come back afterwards as an individual.
Yeah, so they have that chance to come back to public comment. They can respond to the survey. Because it looks like in the past, really, they've just been saying thank you, etc. And are we giving
So
them
they
more?
haven't. So in other
No.
words, that number 6 has not
No.
been done.
No, we just
No,
talked
is that
about
right?
this.
It is being done.
Oh, it
is
What
being
happens-
done.
The only feedback we're getting from them is thanks for the update.
Yeah. So
Okay, it's usually all
it's
we
almost an
hear.
unnecessary step, is what we're hearing. Sounds to me.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't have to step out. I was hoping
Yeah.
to catch all that dialogue. So
No,
wasn't.
I know.
So, okay. Well, that's
Thank
my
you.
comment.
No,
Guys
thank
can-
you.
I'll do some further investigation, but that's my
Okay.
comment, so thanks.
Does anyone have anything else to add to this, or do we want to stick with what we
Just a
decided?
brief question. That being said, if somebody on the Standards Review Committee sent you a comment, we would look at it and
Right.
bring that back to the board, right?
Right.
Because they were involved in the
Well,
beginning, and we need to respect that. And
I think they'd have to bring it as the entire committee, right? Or
Not as an individual.
as an individual, they could just submit comments just along with the rest of the public, right?
They could reference they were on the.
Yes.
But they would get our attention if they said, hey, we were on the committee.
Yeah, and they do. They come back and
Yeah.
talk to us about it all the time.
Yeah, even at one of the public meetings, I think somebody was there, and they said, I was on the Standard Review Committee. That gives them a little
We had a couple
Yeah.
of
More than one.
We had a
Yeah.
couple of them at the science.
And that's helpful, but they're still part of the public at this point.
Right. But they don't lose their voice.
Oh,
And I was just going to at least ask the question, so what does the board do, or what do we do?
Yeah.
And looking at the statute, this 203 statute that we've been looking at, in 13 it says the board shall...
5 years and I haven't done anything.
So in 10, the standards review committee shall submit to the board comments, recommendations for revision. And 11, so I think this is the answer to your question, board member. I mean, the board shall take into consideration the comments and recommendations in adopting the core standards for Utah public schools. So ultimately, it is the
Yeah,
board
ultimately
that
we approve them.
says up or down, or change this or change that. Thank you very much. Standard review committee.
But I think part of our process now is to take public comment in, receive information, and then from there.
Sure. And our concerns likewise should not be dismissed and
course
put
not.
under the,
Yeah.
and our suggestions should also be included
Of course.
as part of that writing committee revisionist.
I make a
type thing.
comment.
Yeah.
It's my experience that the way this works, and maybe it works all different ways, that it comes, the final draft comes to the board.
Yeah.
And the board can make motions and amendments and amend away
Yes.
on that final draft.
We have the final say. That's big.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
or menu.
any board member can make an motion
Sure.
and say, I want to change this or move this around or do whatever,
Sure.
and we do that. We amend them.
So then, are we of one mind that it would be prudent to just delete step 6?
Unless specialists
Go back to 10.
think that that is something that is necessary,
I don't see that hurting or helping, meaning either way. So I think it's kind of
Okay, I'll make a motion that we delete step 6.
I'll second them.
Okay, the motion is to delete step 6 in the standard revision process. Any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion is passed.
Are 5 and 7 too close to the same thing now?
Yes, now we're not AA. Nice. Thank you, Patty, for that. Okay. Just an 11-step process. 11's a nice number.
Well, I think 5 and 7 might be kind of the same
They
thing.
are. I
So-
think they are. I think we might as well make
now
the
you bring
steps
that up.
matter.
Now we get to 10.
Yeah.
Which is really a nice
Well, 10-step process.
Yeah, we'll work
The
on
less
getting it to
steps,
10.
the better. It's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna, if it's okay with everybody, we're gonna move on to 8.2.
Oh, wait, are we going to...
Oh, wait.
Yeah, let's get 5 and 7. Let's deal with that.
Should we meld
you wanna-
5 and
okay.
7 together?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think
It's the
7's a
same
little
thing.
more
Just
specific.
keep 7.
We're gonna get down to one step, you guys. It's really simple.
Special
Price
school
is-
life.
So I would move that. I would
Okay.
move we would delete number 5.
Okay, let's see. So the motion is to delete step 5 in the standards revision process, which says report revision recommendations and progress to the board.
So
Discussion.
I have a question. So we've already talked about what the brief updates would be,
Yeah.
and they would be so many people came to the meeting, it was located such and such. So here on number 5, where you report revision recommendations,
Yeah, maybe that's
what does that look
No,
like?
that's different. The 9 brief updates are the ones where we're talking about public comment without the content of the standard. Once before
So
that,
I'm
we're talking
getting
about
my
what's happening with
brief
the standard.
updates mixed up. Is that
Clarify?
Yes, because this is before the 90-day review, and that's different.
It's important.
Like, this is an important
So that's
step.
the
Yes.
draft.
We should not take, I don't think we should take
I
this
don't
step
think
out.
we should.
Okay,
Unless-
so do we want to just put report revision recommendations and progress to the board?
So this is after like their first
Yes,
meeting.
this is before public comment.
This is what we're finding. This
Okay,
is what
so
we're gonna
maybe we
do.
just don't
Yes.
take it out.
No, I don't think.
I don't know that we need to get it down to 10 unless you guys really want to right now. It is a pretty number.
I think it's
It's
perfect.
the same. So would you read that with
Wait,
6 out?
you think 5 and 7 are the same?
They're very
So
close.
The committee's organized,
So-
and then they're going to start making
Yeah.
revisions.
Patty, can you help clarify?
Yeah, I think what Board Member Cannon was talking about was number 9. So 9, there's updates, and then on 5 and 7, there are updates. So combining 5 and 7 would be clear, because we still, when we were talking about clarifying,
Okay.
the updates
Okay.
we're talking about on number
I
9,
see.
maybe we need to clarify that those updates are about
Yes.
what was listed. So it might be good to actually have that in here,
Uh-huh.
so that there's not, it's not, because that is different than what 5 and 7
Yes.
are asking for.
Well, I'd like to keep the wording report revision recommendations so that we know as a board what the writing committee is going to be addressing.
I like that too. I agree.
Yeah,
I don't want
I
to
think
take that
that's
out.
important.
Which could it be combined with and provide brief updates and check-ins during the revision process? Like, couldn't that be?
Yes.
Could we do some sentence combining activities here?
Come on, English teacher.
Yeah. Well, it is junior high, so it's not that fancy.
Okay, I will change my motion here to say, let's go report revision recommendations and progress to the board with brief updates and check-ins during the revision process.
I love it. So the
Is that
motion
okay?
is to combine steps 5 and 7 and have it read report revision recommendations and progress to the board with brief updates and check-ins during the revision process. Beautiful. Is there any discussion to that?
I'd just like to amend the motion to say also.
Just kidding.
No, that part's fine. And say clarify that the monthly brief updates to the board in step 9 will consist of information regarding the location and the things
public
that we mentioned
review
before for
meetings,
public
yeah.
review, but not the content of the.
Okay, so, because before we had said we didn't need to change that, but you're thinking
Yeah, I
we
think
do.
we do because
Okay.
now we're talking about.
Because we have,
Yes, you're right, you're right.
brief
Okay.
updates.
You're right.
If Janet was fooled, everybody's going to
You're right. I take my side back. That was great.
Just thinking to streamline your time as a board, for that step specifically, as I go over mine, because that's my step today, this almost is something, I don't know if I really even need to talk about it. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe this is something that could go into a consent calendar or something, where it's
Yeah.
like, if you want to pull it and talk about it, that's fine, but here's the report.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I
It
mean,
does.
that will save you any discussion, or, I mean, unless you really wanted to open that up.
I'm pretty sure that there are board members that really want to open that up.
But they could pull it off the consent
They
calendar.
could. I mean, I think maybe with the web-based stuff, I might be extra interested because it's a new thing we're doing, and so it might be nice to have those brought. But
Because, I mean, all we're
But
doing
it
is
can be
talking
real quick.
numbers and dates and future dates.
yeah, we'll time you today and see how fast
Okay.
it is, and we'll make a decision after that.
Did you have a motion with specific language
We
for
did.
number 9?
Oh, will you say that language again for number 9? Are we? Wait. Let's do 5 and 7 first. Okay. Can we do 5 and 7?
Jonathan, read to us what 5 and 7 are melding into.
Yeah, let's do that first.
Right now, the motion is to combine Step 5 and Step 7 in the standards revision process to read, quote, report revision recommendations and progress to the board with brief updates and check-ins during the revision process.
Okay.
Do we need the word periodic?
Do we need and check-ins? Aren't
With brief updates
during the revision
That's
process?
a good
I don't
ACT
think we
question.
need
Good job. Take that out.
check.
I mean, can you? Yes.
So periodic,
Is there any discussion to that motion?
periodically, that word.
You want periodically?
Do we need that?
We don't have. I don't think
It's
we need
not
it
in there
It's not
anymore.
there because we just said report.
So, yeah, no, sure,
recommendations
it
and
should
progress to
say-
the board with brief updates
How
during the
often?
revision process.
Yes.
So then I would say, how often? Is it every month?
Brief
In
check-ins.
in committee? Is it monthly to the board? In
How often do we do
study
it now?
sessions?
As needed.
We've been doing it monthly and pretty much you've been asking for that. So it's
Yeah,
kind of like we bring it, and then you say, "Oh, we want to hear next month how it is." And
So,
could be up to you.
So if we leave it how it is, then we could just request we want to hear about it again. We don't need to bind you by saying every month.
Yeah.
Well,
unless you want to bind them.
Sometimes we don't have. We might not have a meeting every month.
So I kind of hate to be too restrictive, but Jody.
I would bring back to Diana's point that if you say monthly, PE and driver education would come monthly as well.
And then we'd be here till 10.
Where you may not need to hear the couple things that they added with throwing a ball. And maybe you really want to hear that.
I really do.
Is it overhanded or underhanded?
Well, I think it depends on the subject, I guess is my point. Going back to Diana's, some subjects you will like to hear more about than others.
As directed by. As needed.
Can we just throw
as needed?
As needed or requested?
As requested.
Yeah. You don't actually have to add that because you can request something.
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe I think we don't need it, but if it comforts people, we can put it on there.
Periodically still works for me. It's more than
but
once.
again, periodically could be once a year.
Okay, as requested.
Okay. All those in favor of that motion?
Could you repeat it?
Okay. I think you can say you could.
Upon request. No, I want it more mandatory.
Okay. So,
but if you request it, it's mandatory.
Yeah, but I want them to plan. I want them to know that it's coming up and not just.
Okay, let's hear it and see if it meets your guidelines.
report revision recommendations and progress to the board with brief updates during the revision process as requested by the board.
Pretty strong.
As requested by the board?
Yeah, but how often? What's a
as requested?
But again, if we make a specific how often, then we're going to get how the ball is being thrown.
I don't think we need as requested.
I don't even.
Don't you want to know
as
a
requested?
curveball?
I do actually.
Yes. Related to physics. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like the language, but I don't know. I don't have a substitute. So.
Was there any other discussion?
How about just cut it off as requested?
Which is...
Is that where we are?
Okay.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes, and now we're going to deal with number 9, and that's you're up, Scott.
Great. And I can't remember the wording we had before, but number 9.
Jonathan, Jonathan,
you have it, Jonathan, on 9?
For number... No, sorry, I didn't have it.
Okay.
I actually did write something.
Did you?
Yes.
Help me.
You said...
You had some good words.
Well, yeah, so public review, including review by any applicable advisory committees to the board with monthly brief updates regarding location, numbers, and modes. You might want to say of delivery or something there. I just said modes to the board.
Mm-hmm. Modes of delivery to the board.
Okay, so the motion before the board is...
Oh, she can't make a motion.
Well, never mind. That is not a motion.
So I'll make a motion that we adopt the language which was just read to us for paragraph 9.
Which said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, step number 9 is public review, including review by any applicable advisory committees to the board with monthly brief updates to the board, including, say it, dates, places,
and totally different now than what I said. I mean, it's just you're putting the words in different order.
Yeah, and I think there's too many includings in there. And Diana probably.
Do you want me to read what I said before?
Yeah.
Public review, including review by any applicable advisory committees to the board with monthly brief updates regarding location, numbers, and modes of delivery to the board.
I like that.
Actually, don't need to the board.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I think you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. That's my motion.
That's a good motion. Is there any discussion?
Did you get that, John?
You don't need to.
Can I just ask?
You know what? We can work together.
Who would be an applicable advisory committee that would be involved in
the student advisory committee?
Access.
So
access. So student.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion made by Board Member Hanson, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
We're down to 10.
You guys, we got it down to a 10-step process. Program, whatever. That means it's perfect. It's a 10. Thank you so much. We have done one item. Go us. Okay.
We're only 45 minutes?
No, we're not. make it up because we're going to time Ricky on number 8.2.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Our next item is a discussion item, and I'm hoping we can keep it to about 15 minutes, but I understand that we might need to discuss it more. Let's see. So the goal in January, we reviewed statutory requirements for 53E 4203, current practice, and an audit request. In statute, it says we need to establish a timeline to review for a cyclical standards review. And I don't know if we have this still, but in 2014, Diana sent me something with what the past board had with a timeline. And we were maybe going to try to upload that to board docs so you could look at that. I don't think it's on there now. I don't know if, Jonathan, you could do that, or if you have copies. So I thought that would be helpful for you guys to see that, because I think if you look at statute, we need a timeline.
That's not it.
That's
I'll hold on to this one. This is
Okay.
Oh, yeah, this is just not the same.
Yeah. Oh, not the same?
Yeah, not
okay.
the same, yeah.
Well then, you know what, why don't I let Diana, will you talk to us about kind of the standards review and revision process and what the document says and the questions, etc.
Okay. So what you see for in the first list is the last time that each of the standards were revised. The ones that have an asterisk behind them are the ones that are currently under revision. So the first bunch of them all have asterisks because they're individual science and health courses at different levels. And so you can just kind of get an idea there of what has been not a timeline going forward, but the timeline from the past. As Chair Gravett said, there was a process that was established in 2014. It was never actually implemented because the board at that time decided that the 12-step process was the timeline. That they decided that was their interpretation of that rule at that time, that the process met the requirement of the timeline. And so even though the board adopted it, they turned right around and it was never implemented.
Okay.
What you see under when our standards revised, last month you had a big conversation about what an audit would be. And so I asked the academic content area specialists, that's really the ones that you see listed here. I did leave off library, I realized later. And they've been done within the last 4 years. So I'll add those to the list later. So I asked all the content as specialists and also Debbie to submit questions that could be used to sort of trigger the possible revision process. So all of those questions that are bulleted there are things that could be asked to say, yes, it's time to revise the standards. They might not be doing the job that we thought that they were doing. And then on the back side, I printed it off, I'm old school, sorry. Who initiates the process? That's something else. This is another question that you can ask to talk about is it only board members? Is it something you want staff to bring to you when we notice that standards are very old? Is it something you want to hear from your teachers that are teaching? How does it get going? And so then the big question is, what changes should be made to the process? And we're not talking about the 12-step process here. We're talking about what precedes that. So what should be the stuff that generates the beginning of the 12-step process, which is the board says, establish a standards review committee.
And if you guys refresh your board docs, the document you see up there, which is, it was never implemented, but that's the timeline they made back in 2014.
Right.
And I guess my question to you guys, and feel free to offer anything, is do we want something like a timeline? And I know districts like something like that because it has predictability. Teachers like things like that because it lets them know what's coming up. Or do we like more the question base? What are your thoughts? We need to help staff find out what would be best.
So I talked with a board member in Ohio, and they have it in code where it's standards reviews come up every 5 years because that's written in code. So that's and what are we doing with this now?
I think this is
keep going. Okay. So I like that if teachers are seeing holes in the standards, that they can voice their concerns and say, we need to relook at this. I like that parents can say, we've got concerns. I want to have their input as well. And I would also, in my case, have a board member say, I have concerns and I want these questions addressed. And as far as question goes, I went to task last night until 1 in the morning and did 2.5 pages of questions to come up with. Some of them applicable to math, some general. I think to have all stakeholders' input of saying, look, this didn't get covered, should be included. I think there's too many voices being left out.
But what you're saying is like every 5 years. So
every 5 years.
But not like every year. And I'm wondering if Patty can talk to us about this, or Linda, go first.
Can I make a couple of comments from things I've heard from teachers?
Yes, please.
I think 5 years may be too soon.
It is
just
too soon.
Because by the time they get it in and get it and learn it and everything, and then they're just changing it again. So I think that might be too soon. But I think we should look at the oldest ones first. I think that would make most sense, that we look at the older. I don't think we should have ever let elementary health get that old. It's just, there's just some of these are so old that they should have been taken care of long ago.
Right.
So that's just my opinion.
I will tell you, as an English teacher, even though the standards have been in place for a few years, we just barely got textbooks last year. And so if you were to revise the standards, it's a lot of money.
But see, that's to me, that sounds ridiculous, right? Why wait 9 years later?
It takes training. Everything takes so much time. But anyway, Scott, and then I want Patty to talk about this.
I wonder if some areas maybe are moving more quickly than others. So maybe this is more of a two-step process where we have to look which one's the oldest, and then has this field advanced and ask some of those other questions. Mm-hmm. I also wonder if some of this, a lot of it's subjective, but there's some of those measurements the questions that were proposed that are kind of quantitative, where we could look at test scores and they could just spit out in the spreadsheet, and we could say, here's a gap that's been developed just by numbers that wouldn't take any work especially once we have our super duper data collection system working. And maybe that would be step 2. So here's what's the age of the standard, and then how do we look on these measurements that don't take a lot of work to look at, and then from there go into asking the experts and seeing as the field changed and all those kind of things. Is there a way that we can do this?
Right. Sure. I'm kind of visualizing like a chart and kind of check these things off.
When the red light comes on, then we go into the review.
Here's another factor is, I know that in 2.5 years ago they did mathematics, but what's the depth level? It wasn't very much. It was little reviews. Corrections, so it wasn't an in-depth analysis.
Review when we did
but there, I was not aware of any public comment during that time.
There was.
It was the full 12-step process. It started with
Jolie is crying.
Okay, well, I
like to share your.
I wasn't.
It just took over a year.
I'm sure the time it took, but. As far as public being aware, I don't know that it was.
We did the whole 12 steps.
I'm sure you did. I'm not saying that you haven't.
But once we kick into that mode, we've got to run through all those steps.
I understand that, but again, it didn't meet. Types of from what I am seeing and what I'm still hearing is that there's still holes in the math standards. Is that it doesn't it. We're still getting questions, the same questions that we've had since the very beginning, and that weren't addressed. So,
what I want to make sure we do here is, because I think we need to make sure we're talking about all standards, because we've got to get this process in place before we can move to that.
I understand.
And I think that's what staff is asking us to come up with, a general, not a specific subject.
So let me go to the questions that I have written down. What makes a good standard? How do the standards relate? Is the standard developmentally appropriate? Is the standard flexible? Is the standard too narrow? when it addresses a relatively small portion of content? Is it too narrow? Is the standard too broad? Are we covering too much in a sentence, or is it just one sentence? Is it plain and clear? Are there building steps missing? Can parents and students understand them? Are we talking education needs, or are we talking, general content? Are the standards one-sided, emphasizing one philosophy over another? Are we too focused on one direction? Did we cover a breadth? Because we want to educate students, we don't want to dictate to students, right? So I think there's a difference there. Are the standards attainable by minorities? Are we able to reach those levels? Are they too high? Right? When we say rigorous standards, that may be fine for some groups of kids, but other groups of kids can't reach that because of other setbacks. Same goes for special needs. Are the standards attainable for special needs? Can we measure students' proficiency with the standards? Do we need to look at, okay, now I'm getting into math. So do we look at the standards from other countries, and why are the other countries obtaining higher metrics than we are, right? We test students all across the board, where in China they don't do that, right? So to say that China or Singapore or Finland, that we're not on par, well, why? We need to be apples to apples, not oranges to apples. Are we focusing too much on the results and not the means, right? On standards. Is it too much emphasis being given on strategies instead of correctness? Are we, do we need to demonstrate 4 ways to have a pedagogy? And these questions. Yeah.
So it seems to me those questions would be ones that we would ask once we got into the 10-step process, or no? Because those are looking at how to change the standards to me, rather than do they trigger a whole revision of the standards. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think it can be related to both.
Okay. I just was trying to clarify that. And then thank you for those questions. Patty, will you help us understand this document or kind of guide us?
I'm wondering if this might tie it all together. So this might be a way to guide this discussion. And it incorporates everything that you just said. And it incorporates what I kind of put around the table as well. So on Tuesday, Education Commission of the State is something that the Utah State Board of Education have a contract with, and they're able to provide documentation of what's happening nationwide. So we can ask a question, and then they can provide, usually within 24 hours, some sort of a synopsis across nationally what's happening. So this is one that, within 24 hours, and said, yes, we've already done this. But it was back in 2014. If we want other questions, we can always ask some other questions as well. But I'm going to just do a short synopsis of this. It has 8 different states and what they do in standards revision. So if I were to do a synopsis of what it is, they have everything between 2 years and 10 years. But if we were to take what's being stated here in this room today, maybe it is a 2-step process for us, and it could be similar to some of the states that are in here. So one would be a red flag indicator, which is what Board Member Hansen was just talking about, something to do with scores and achievement metrics for all subpopulations, exactly what we were just talking about. So if we look at our subgroups of individual students, we can have a red flag indicator to say something is going wrong. And if I were to look right here, and it's not just about standards, that's one thing, that's the board's role. The board's role is in setting the standards, and as we go through, one of the things that this document talks about is if we set standards without competencies and proficiencies, then we're not doing a service. So we can set standards, and then we can do competencies, which we're moving toward this competency-based education, but then it's up to the districts to purchase the curriculum, and it's up to teachers to implement those lessons in their classrooms. So if we were to look at this, there's 2 things on here that I think are very critical, one on page 21 and one on page 22 that talk about those 2 indicators. One, it says standards at the bottom of page 21. Standards by themselves will not yield gains in student achievement or any other improvements states are relying on them to produce. Standards are only one piece in the puzzle that also encompasses assessment, curriculum, accountability, teacher educational and professional development, and intervention and support for struggling students in schools. But just as important, if we were to go down to right where above where it says author, listening to and taking seriously those parent-cited instances of confusing or poor implementation, however, can help to identify where more work is needed. Parent voices are informed by the real-time frustrations their children too often bring home with them from school. Developing vehicles to gather ongoing parent input is crucial. So if we could have something as for you to talk about, is one is a red flag indicator with scores, achievement, and measures by subgroups. But the second is a timeline, and within that timeline, this is something that, and within the timeline, there could be a every 5 years, every 10 years, whatever you guys decide on.
Because it's a 2-year process. I would say
and I'm not saying a time, but if there's a timeline, but with that timeline, there's the questions that go through. So then you review the list of questions, and then at that point, you guys, the review committee could say, we're fine, but in 2 years, let's revisit it again. Right. So it goes through the 10 years, in 2 years, revisit it again, or whatever the cycle is.
I wonder if we should survey teachers.
Well, in there was something about surveying teachers, which I like.
That's on the dashboard. I want this to be like school grading, and then you have all these different areas, and you've got the little needles that are different ways.
I just haven't heard something that is in my mind. We have the gentleman from Pearson sitting here. Maybe that's what triggered it. But along with these standards, when we go through and change our standards, there is we need our assessments to be aligned with our standards, which is going to cost a whole lot of money.
Well, depends on which ones they are.
Yes. Yeah. So I was thinking that as well. But if we're moving to a competency-based education, a standards assessment is not going to help, and we're going to have a myriad of problems. And I'm thinking that maybe we have a list of approved assessments that the state approves that a school can access. So like a charter, if they're teaching completely different, still using the standards, but teaching through different curriculum, that they choose a test that supports that curriculum, that those methodologies that they're teaching in the classroom, so that they can test based on what they're teaching and not. Right? So I would like to be able to say, let's have a menu of assessments that they can choose from to meet their needs based on their teaching. Because I mean, this is really about local control. This is about supporting all students, and all students do not learn the same. And if we're moving towards competency-based, we better be prepared for what competency-based. Otherwise, we're going to have the same problem that USDB is having, being so diverse in its platform of fitting the child's and parents' needs and not what the school has. Right?
I don't know if we want local control and assessment. Really.
Well, and I don't know that we
because we want to compare statewide. At least that's what the superintendents tell me. They want to compare statewide.
And to me as a teacher, if the standards don't connect to the competencies, there's something wrong, I think. But
I don't know.
Maybe that's another discussion for another time.
Down the road.
Do we want to down the road of this dashboard or the indicators?
Were you finished? We kind of interrupted.
Oh no, I'm
okay. Scott, absolutely.
No, I was just wondering if that's the direction we want to head towards. Do you want to shift gears and go another way, or do you want to go towards a dashboard kind of thing where there's some
or a graphic or a chart that we look at whether has there been a change in proficiency rate?
I'm just imagining. I think we've done a good job with school grading this year. I think that's very visual, and we got all the different areas. And same thing, just drop in different metrics.
Well, and you can see yes, no, yes,
so
no.
How old
has
is
it been more
We're
than
in the
8
red.
years?
It's 8 years. This one.
Have there been significant parent concerns?
Do we have gaps in assessments versus?
How do you measure significant parent concerns?
Okay, maybe that was a bad one. Has there been significant improvement?
But that's why I think you can survey parents and teachers if you want.
So you could do the survey.
But I don't know if parents would. A lot of parents are not. Don't even know that there's standards. There are a lot of parents that don't even know there's standards.
No, but they understand that their kid. They understand that
they give us input.
They understand that their child is coming home crying. They can't communicate. And then when I have a principal sending out an email, please don't help your kids on math because you don't know how to do it. I'd rather have the teachers do it. We've got a problem.
Mr. Incredible had the same problem.
I had it in my district.
Yes,
you don't do that.
My parents had the same problem 50 years ago.
And that's wrong.
Maybe staff could change some of the subjective things though into a number, relative to this standard is getting a lot of parental attention.
And if you look at some of the questions, and I'm wondering, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but what if we could direct staff kind of, because Diana's kind of magic, and she can take probably
We still have her.
Let's get I know. But what if we direct the staff to come back based on our conversations, come back with maybe some options, whether it is a graphic or a dashboard that would help us indicate, like maybe it's every 8 years. Has this been reviewed in the past 8 years? Have there been any legislative changes? Just some questions that maybe are more objective, and we can. Could you do something magic like that?
What I was going to offer is that what if I took K6 Social Studies, which is the oldest on the list right now.
When was it implemented?
And K6 Social Studies 2010 was
do you know
the list.
I know the ELA and the math were adopted in August.
But both ELA and math have been updated since. So yes, there was a 2010 revision for ELA and math, but both of them have been updated by the board since.
Yeah.
So the oldest one that's never been updated is social studies. So what I was going to say is I could play with these questions, and the idea of a dashboard.
Yes.
I'm sort of picturing a red, yellow, green, like, ooh, here's a problem, here's a developing problem, and here's a, hey, this is fine. And I'll just lock it up for social studies. It's the magic. And then you can see if that's the direction that you want us to go in general. We'll just do it for social studies.
It would be great to have some visuals.
And then you could still play with the timeline.
Then we have things to critique.
And you can actually say, okay, do that for all of them. And then you could make some decisions around that.
I would love that.
So
input from committee.
If I may share, then I will write up my questions and forward them to Diana.
That goes for everybody.
Yep. Yeah. If anybody has questions, I'll kind of start with
certain ones that you like on
I'll
here.
probably try to think of 20 questions.
20 question process.
I would like to keep it to 10 because that's our board theme. No, we have board themes.
Well, I think
10.
But about something that fits on a page anyway.
I think this one that Scott said was good too. What was that one? Has the field changed?
Yes,
right?
That's important.
And maybe teachers.
Definitely
right? Well, I know that teachers are starting to talk to me about ELA.
And what board member Cummins brought up when you were talking about minorities or special ed populations, I think those could be red flags if we see a group that is not it's disparate.
Can we pull it out of the test data?
Yeah. So one of the problems.
Sliced and diced.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
In this committee, we free fall.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to be rude.
Oh, okay.
I'm concerned with the international standards that the special needs are under, right? And Diana, do you remember what it's called? The international standards that special needs that the board adopted. Oh gosh, 2012. 2013
for special needs students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was an international one.
Are you talking about the severe that's I thought it was like a we with WISCA.
Well, WIDA
is for language.
Yeah.
But you're talking about there are standards for the 1%.
There's international. They're international.
But we just approved those a couple of years ago.
No,
with the
for the assessments. The science assessments, I think, is right.
If you think of those,
I just know that Lindsay was very mad at me when she looked at me very mad.
Yeah, and I forgot what they're called, but.
Before we move off this discussion, I just wanted to check if there's anybody in the audience that wanted to contribute or add input.
Doesn't it look fun? You could come right up.
Yeah, Sarah, I saw you came in, and I know you always have something to say.
Except for today.
Oh, today's the one exception. Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to contribute? Otherwise, we will just direct staff to we'll make. We need to make that motion. I'll make a motion that I move that staff come back with options for the cyclical standards review and bring it back next month for us to look at.
Second motion.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, great. Okay, that was only 15 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to move to 8.3, which this should be very brief because we promised. Okay, he's going to give us Janet, you're practice what we just talked about. We're going to practice what we just talked about.
The
update according to time, modalities, etc. Modalities, you know what I mean. Okay, Ricky.
Okay, so this is Ricky Scott's Science Teaching Learning again. So we're on step 9 now. So we're on our very first monthly review. The 90-day review started on January 10th. January 10th. So we're less than a month in. In that time, on the online survey, we've had a little close to 300 responses on the online survey so far. And we've had one in-person face-to-face meeting in Alpine School District where we had 30 participants that were there, close to, 2 of which were members of the Standards Review Committee. And then going forward...
May I interject?
Let him finish and then we'll... Okay.
Going forward, we, based on the meeting that we had up at the Capitol on the 31st, I've kind of updated the future schedule as far as these reviews or the meetings go. So there'll be 3 remaining face-to-face meetings at Box Elder, SUU, and then here at the Utah State Board of Education on those dates. And then we have system in place for online meetings. We have it as organized as again, trying this for the first time. We have everything in place for it to go forward. We sent an email today to science leads, curriculum directors, and charter school leaders to get this information about these public hearings out to, and specifically saying, and I have like a little simple email they can copy to their teachers, to their parents, to their students, to be able to get it to as many people as possible with the information. That's my report.
Okay, Lisa, you have a question?
Yes, 2 now. Could you forward that email to me so that I can get it out to my people?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think other board members would like that as well.
Absolutely. I'll just
do it to the whole board.
I'll send it to Lorraine, and she will get
it. Second of all, what was discussed in the meeting? Were there any concerns? What was the pros, the cons? Was there anything?
So I'm going to stop you there. I'm sorry. This is part of that, what we talked about, the participant bias. We don't want that out here yet because we don't want to bias future results. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
I'll talk to you offline.
Okay, yes. Yeah, we just want to make sure.
So, yeah, because, I was there. Okay?
Yeah. So,
but if I said to you, this is what, I thought the concerns were or weren't or anything, then,
yes, those people on the side.
People are listening, right? And they could go, oh, I have an opinion about that,
and
right? And then
repeated exposure.
Right.
To me, I think that's a snowball effect, and I think it does generate discussion. I think it's important, but I will talk offline.
Yeah, I think do we agree that probably that should be left on?
No, but I'll talk.
Can I ask, you had the time later this time. Was there any feedback about the later slot?
I didn't get any specific feedback in any way.
I got lost on the way there.
Okay.
I'm not very good in the dark.
So if you could choose easier places for me to find, we appreciate that. Any other comments?
Just a question about WebEx. I haven't looked into it yet. The instructions, are they on the board's website?
They're posted on the science page of the board's website.
Is it easy enough that you can just click a link and be in the meeting?
It is super easy. The link's there. You click on it, and all it asks you to do is put in your first name, last name, email address, and you're in the meeting. It'll open 15 minutes before the meeting starts.
And are we going to try to track locations for the people that are logging in? Can we ask for that information, or is that...
So the system really doesn't have a way to do that. It doesn't allow for us to track locations. However, going on to what was said before, what I'm really interested in is how effective this is. So at the very end of the survey, as soon as it's done, participants will be sent to a survey to fill out that's really simple, that does ask that question. From what district are you from? Do you think was this effective? What would you change? Really not to the standards themselves, but to the online meeting, to get some feedback, to be able to give a report on, here's what I heard regarding this online meeting. So it'll give some of that, but that's only for those who choose to participate.
Yeah. As far as the logging goes, there's no way that we can just have that be another box that
I can look into it.
Say, which district are you from? Something like that.
Patty, did you have insight into that?
We do it according to the IP address. It depends on if we have extra programming that goes into that. Right now, we currently aren't doing that as part of
kind of a backdoor way to collect it.
Yeah.
I was just asking if they'd be upfront about it. And
just district. I would say just
district. But maybe we can get a lot of that from the survey.
So if we just do the survey, what I do on some of the surveys is what district do you live within? Because then you get, even if you're a charter, you still know that you live within a Jordan School District or Graham District.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how many people will opt into the survey, and
Well,
just click
maybe
on
because they're there, they care.
Yeah, maybe so. They might
I will get that.
active. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I will reflect how much the board members interact with their constituents and let them know.
And thank you, by the way, Ricky, for your flexibility on our meeting on the Hill. I appreciate you making another adjustment for us on this.
You're so great.
Yeah, I feel good about the schedule now, I think, after thinking about it.
Any other questions for Ricky or comments?
Just one quick question.
Oh, yeah.
I was just curious if you
Will you come up to the table and tell us your name, please?
Sorry, yes. Rich Youngland Pearson. I was curious to know if you were far enough along in the process and to have a clearer visibility about when state board might be approving and then when standards might be implemented, or if it's too soon to know that.
Adoption, I will have to. Are you asking this of me?
Yeah.
You know more than
You're probably
Let me tell you, I'm pretty sure the board's going to adopt it. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know when the board's going to adopt. But our hope is that assuming that the board, if these standards can be adopted sometime during the summer months, that will give us at least a full year in preparation for the fall to get for implementation. So the hope is that we would start implementing 2020.
Fall 20.
For the 2020-2021 school year. That's kind of the hope. But again, because assessment is a big piece, we want to make sure that the first year of implementation, again, it kind of goes back. I like that this is still up here because if you look at how it is, there's a public release and revision, adoption, and professional development for a year, and then we have an implementation and an assignment that align. So it's good.
So we need to do that.
So anyway, so that's kind of the process that we've been using. So that's the hope, but it really is dependent upon the process.
And you guessed my selfish interest. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Ricky? Thank you, Ricky Scott.
Thanks, Ricky.
Thank you.
Oh, Janet, did you time?
Oh, well, my 5-minute thing went off just a little bit ago, so you're very close.
Okay. Let's move on to action item number 8.4. This one is just due for a 5-year review, so of course we have Jeffrey Dunn up here. So, Jeffrey, why don't you just talk to us about what this is, what are the changes, what do we need to do?
He wouldn't allow me to change anything, so
He wouldn't if anything's changeable. I think I know why, but let's have him talk.
Yeah, so this is the rule on, Jeffrey Van Wooten, Policy Advisor. So this is Rule 524, and it is a rule on paraprofessionals and paraeducators. Mm-hmm. And currently our staff is rewriting the manual on paraprofessionals and paraeducators, so we are waiting for the manual to be done so that the rule and the manual coincide. But it is up for 5-year continuation now, so
we need to continue it.
Yes.
But if we make amendments, it's just going to mix with the manual.
Correct.
Okay.
it just talks about NCLB in there all the time.
Yes, I saw that too.
That will be coming out for sure.
Right. Janet.
And then on line 21 and 24, it has USLE, which would become USBE. Yeah. And then, just because I was feeling it, on page 3, and the numbering was crazy. Each page starts with number 1. Page 3, line 2, anyway, I had a question in here because we have now requirements for paraprofessional, and some of them will be completing at least 2 years at an accredited higher education institute. And as I was reading this, it came to my mind that these people will often, in my mind, be more qualified to teach than our LEA-specific licensed people. So is there a way to distinguish between an LEA-specific licensees versus a paraprofessional? And I'm wondering about pay scales for both of these. Because if these people are more qualified than LEA-specific licensees, I would think they would be worthy of higher salary, higher pay.
Yeah, we can't.
So this isn't a direct answer to your question, but we do have pathways that take paraprofessionals to the teaching profession.
That's right.
So it's very common for paraprofessionals to, maybe it's like a mom who really just wants to be involved in her school, and they start working with kids and say, yeah, this is for me. Mm-hmm. And so then we have methods. So, the pay scale, again, all of that is left up to the LEA. We don't even touch that. But to think about somebody who then really could be a good teacher, because remember, paraprofessionals also, that's usually a part-time job. And so some people like that. They like that flexibility. They want to just bounce into the classroom. But then we have ways of fully licensing people, and it's actually a really good pathway into teaching.
It's just rankled me a little bit that these people would have a better education for teaching than some of our LA specific.
Then no education at all.
Exactly.
Well, and not in any program at all. They might think about it sometime. That's the thing that bothered me. I might think about it someday. It's just different.
Just write that out.
Any other questions for Jeffrey or comments or discussion?
It just seems like
You will see this rule again shortly. I'm not exactly sure what the timeline on the manual is, but I imagine that this will probably be late spring.
I mean, it looks like we need a lot of changes, but we just need to continue it. So I'm looking for a motion to.
I move that we continue R277524 at draft 1, and that we send it to the board on first reading and send it to the board for continuation. With second final reading.
With the added revisions.
Can we do that even though they haven't made them yet? With the added revisions?
With the added revisions coming on the second.
Added revisions will be added when we amend the full rule. We're just going to do a straight continuation this go around.
Because they're going to make a.
Okay. Then I withdraw my comment.
Okay. So the motion before the committee is to approve R277524 for its 5-year review and continuation and send to the full board. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Oh, wait, Leah. Voorhees.
Won't affect your motion. Assistant Superintendent for Voorhees. I'm sorry I was in law licensing, but I just want you to know that the manual is going to LEAs on February 28th for their first review and for feedback.
Oh, good.
So that's where we are in the process.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, that's good to know. All right, let's move to action item 8.5. This amendment, let's see. 5. Wait, we did have it. It was, yeah, it passed.
I know we started too, huh? We
I know, I'm trying to like every time
I know, I'm like, we said, I'm just making sure. Okay. Oh, so we didn't know on this one. Oh, Brian.
Hello.
You're okay.
I'm here.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
No, I'm much better.
Oh, okay. We didn't know if you were going to make it. I will turn the time over to you then to talk about R277733.
Okay. Thank you. Brian Olmstead, Coordinator in Student Support with Adult Risk and Custody Programs. So 733 is our adult ed program for rule. What we have, the only change in draft 1 comes on line 217 and I guess and 218. It's about the carryover limit at LEAs.
Yeah.
And we would like that to just say 10% and strike the or 50,000, whichever is less.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
Can I make the motion?
Oh, sure, of course.
Then I move that we approve R277733 draft 1 on first reading and send to the board. Is it being continued as well? No. On first reading as amended and
hold on, Brian has a comment.
I found something else. That's in draft 1. That's the only change. And you know how you look at a document 100 times and you see something. So actually, on page 1, I noticed that we have a URL in here for our policy and procedures guide. Probably bad practice because that URL
changed.
If you clicked on it, it wouldn't work.
Okay. So we need to
remove
that.
Is the URL incorrect?
Yeah.
The URL.
Can we just put a copy of the guide is located on the USBE website?
That's exactly what. Yeah.
Jeff.
There is a reason why the URL is there. Whenever we incorporate a document by reference, the rulemaking manual requires that we put the URL or the place where the document is located in the rule itself. So we would have to put the updated URL in because we're required by the rule writing manual to do so.
So we can't say just a copy of the guide is located at the Utah State Board of Education's website?
Yeah, it has to be this.
The URL.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. But we can do that.
But we can easily update that line to be the correct URL.
So
Yes.
should we amend it to
So
say?
do you want to amend that?
Yeah, I
Just
can
like
amend
in
it
your
with the
motion?
amendment. Yeah, so I move that we pass out R277733 Draft 1 to the board on first reading with the following amendment. A change on line 25 to the current URL. And that we ask that the board approve or suggest the board approve it on second and final reading with that amendment.
Okay, so the motion is...
I'm sorry, I'm so tired.
And you know what? That was beautiful. The rhythm was nice. It was almost a poem. The motion is that we approve R277733 Draft 1 on first reading and update line 25, or actually it's 26, right? To the current URL. Is it 25? Okay, update line 25 with the correct URL. Is there any discussion on that, Jen?
Yeah, I have some questions. On line 18, it starts here talking about a high school equivalency exam, or HSE. Is that different than a GED? Or has that replaced the GED?
It's the same. It's the same. So the current HSE selected by Utah is the GED. But what happened recently in the market is the GED is not the only player.
Oh.
Okay. So the reference to high school equivalency exams now include, there's 3 major national players.
Okay, so there are 3 possibilities.
Yes.
All right, I didn't. That's good to know. Okay, then on line 172, each eligible adult education student shall have a written CCRP. What does CCRP stand for?
College and Career Readiness Plan.
Okay. Is there any way that I couldn't find anywhere in here that was spelled out so you would know what it says?
It's there. Look on 61.
Is it 61?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm on 161.
Yep.
Okay, as long as it's in there.
It is.
I'm sorry I missed it. Line 61. Okay, there it is. Thank you.
So that's replaced the Student Education
SEO.
Occupation Plan, SEO.
As a mom, I just they
Okay,
don't
so
change it again.
So what is it say on line 26?
I never know what it's called.
I had something written down here about an SELP update, but that's okay.
If I may, Janet, if I may, while you're thinking, or
Can I just have one more? I was looking at the wrong item. Lines 200 and 201. It says it mentions the alternative route to licensure program. Do we need to update that?
That's a great catch.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that was my last thing.
no, go ahead. I'll just.
Oh, I've got a couple, and this is mostly for my education, so bear with me. But on line 29, we start out just with the definition of an adult. They have to be over 18, or if they're emancipated earlier, they still qualify as adults, or is that the?
They do.
So we work with 16 and 17-year-olds, but only as they have worked with like counselors and admin and parents and to make sure that their involvement in K-12 and transition to adult ed is the right thing. And so emancipated youth who are emancipated are considered adults as well. That's
so
true.
Do we need to change that definition in 29 to say adults are individuals 18 years of age or over or emancipated.
What about line 36 and 37?
36.
Then it goes down further. I got a couple more questions, but that's that one. Then 33. This is adult education by LEAs or other eligible providers. I assume that's like community action groups or other people who are teaching adult ed.
Right, community-based organizations that compete for our federal funds.
Okay, and so we still exercise control over them through our rules. Correct. They get the money, they adopt the rules. And then 35. Are we on the same lines?
No, but I just have a question with what he said. Does that include Planned Parenthood?
Planned Parenthood as an eligible provider?
Yes.
Adult education.
Well, so
Classes
any
that are outside that use district services or offer them to district.
So any not-for-profit, you can have for-profit. The eligibility of the agency to compete for adult education funds is pretty broad.
So it could.
What they would have to show is demonstrated effectiveness.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that Planned Parenthood would have a history of being a basic literacy provider.
Basic literacy, really?
Well, for other
For math and language arts.
Well, no, for health, but wouldn't they do it for health as well?
No.
No?
No, it's for
So,
math.
I'll have to look at that.
Yeah,
I'll have to look at that. Okay. So it might be something different then.
Like Ogden and Weaver run some adult ed through the community action partnership there.
Yeah.
And they draw on teachers and things from the districts.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try and be quick here. 35. So this is the individuals have to be both present in the state and they have an intent to reside. Do they just have to state their intent? Say I'm gonna be here, or can people come across and get adult ed just because they're in Utah?
So they have to have proof of residency, but we also serve bordering communities.
I saw something in there about they could cross over and get some kind of a waiver.
Yeah. We cross over too.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So
go ahead. So
so the intent to reside is
that means they've got a utility bill or rental contract or something. It's not just presence and them saying, I'm going to be here. Okay. Right. 36 and 37.
I thought you said you were be quick. You're going one line at a time. No.
I'm learning. Just bear with me.
It's very meticulous.
I know you.
So, out-of-school youth who have or have not, and adults who have or have not graduated from high school. So, can adults who have graduated from high school participate in adult ed?
Yeah. So, and probably all of our experience is similar. If you have a high school diploma, you might know of your friend, and you wonder, how did you get a high school diploma? So, having a high school diploma does not equate to literacy or numeracy levels. So, if an adult has low literacy, but they have a diploma, we serve them with our literacy programs.
Nice. Okay.
And so your eligibility is more about where your level is at. And so you would come in and work with the teachers to increase your levels.
So and that's my misconception. I was thinking adult ed, the purpose of it is to get people to get a diploma or a substance.
And that's one of so three main programs in adult ed are ESL programs, adult basic literacy, and then high school completion or high school equivalency.
Okay, thank you.
So Fort River Hanson, just for your information, 50% of our graduate students are not at collegiate reading level.
I believe that.
So that would come up.
And the adult ed rate or level is if you are below the 9th grade, then that will 9th grade reading level or math level, that will put you in the basic literacy program.
Okay. Then 137, waiver release form. means a form signed by an adult education student allowing for release. So can a non-adult student, I mean, we have some 16-year-old students in there, can they sign their own waiver?
Only if they're emancipated.
Okay, so this just says signed by an adult education student.
But if we fix lines 29 and 36 and 37, then that's what
so
an award
does
is.
it mean adult, or is it an adult education student? Because there are adult education students who are 16 and 17 years old and haven't emancipated, right?
Oh, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so I don't think they can sign a waiver.
Adult education or adult.
Yeah. Is that, am I registering or no?
Well, I'm trying to, and I don't have the full, what's the section on?
So that one's on a waiver release form, means a form signed by an adult educated student allowing for release of the student's personal data, includes social security number. And I think we could potentially get in trouble with FERPA if we have kids signing away their own data.
But if they're emancipated, can they?
They could, yeah. If they're emancipated, then the parents aren't exercising control.
But is it a student who's an adult instead of adult education?
I read that as adult education student.
Adult education program unless they were an adult.
No, there's a provision up here for 16 years.
Oh, that's right. That's right. No longer get a
alternative path. Okay. Yeah, that's. So is that? I don't know. Is that?
So what's happening there is, and I'll stick with the main program. The adults are signing our ability to do data matches with our partners, DWS, post-secondary, to connect their outcomes beyond our programs and look at completion data and things. And so you're right that a 16 and 17-year-old who's there still under their parent supervision, but for reasons have been put into an adult ed program, everybody agreeing this is the right thing. Mm-hmm. Our form does have the parent sign, but this language does not match to that because it says just the adult ed student.
Can we just take out adult student instead of adult education?
Yeah, if it said adult student can sign it.
Can we just change that? Take out.
Or parent or guardian, something. I just don't want us to be in trouble.
Right.
Would it, if I may, would it fit under the definition that's in the student data privacy policy? Isn't there a definition there that talks about
who can release data?
Yes, and
it might be we could refer back to that.
Yeah, I think it's in there, so I'll have to check. I need to check. Whitney would know.
Maybe we could just direct to address that here. And then 209, no eligible LEA shall receive less than its portion. What is less than its portion of an 8% base amount? What does that mean? What's its portion?
So our funding formula takes
And they're getting some cut of this 8%, but I don't understand what cut that is. It's just a question on 209.
Yeah.
And I apologize for hitting you with this cold in this meeting. I should approach you beforehand, but I ran into time constraints too with this one.
What, do all LEAs get an 8% base?
This is like the 8% gets divided up somehow amongst the LEAs, but I don't understand what that's saying.
So it's actually, the base amount is 10%. I'm trying to remember our funding formula percentages because they changed. So 15% is carved off for corrections ed. Where's that? That's one of the sections.
209.
No, there's a whole section on the formula.
Right, I found a part of the code.
Doesn't it say just according to the...
I'm reading the code section. I looked back at the code section it references, and I couldn't make heads or tails of that as far as what its portion is.
I'm glad other people have that experience. I go try to look at the code and it makes no sense.
Well, I don't know if the code's been updated, which it has. It says 7/118 effective date on the latest version of it. I didn't look back at the historical version. And I don't want to make this the focus of the meeting, get hung up on just this portion, but is there something we can come back maybe? And
is this time sensitive right now? I mean, like this part, do you want us to come back with some of these answers?
I was going to say,
How quickly do we have to pass this
That's
down?
well, it's good to get all the questions, and then we can come back with some of the
And that's actually something we
could just send it back.
Like our other rule.
Or we could just have Brian meet with.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could try to do that too. That's my problem. I should have done that beforehand.
And then it could incorporate what Janet said on line
201.
201. And then you've been writing down,
we have a FERPA question.
Yes, we have a FERPA question, so I'm wondering if we can just send this back and...
Yeah.
Unless it's time sensitive.
This is not time sensitive at all.
Okay, so we have some confusion on that line.
One more, I think, that so 225 relates to the 50K that I know is the emphasis here. On 225 it says the superintendent may consider excess funds. Should we not change that to shall consider excess funds? Because now these LEAs can be keeping quite a bit more money there.
That's true. That's good.
And the next year, I think that should be taken into consideration. It doesn't say what she has to do. It just says she shall consider those excess funds. 50K may not take a shall.
Well, that 228, that 50 should be crossed out. Right?
Yeah, so now it's going to be 10%. So now that it's bumped up, that could be a lot of money for the bigger districts.
Well, yeah, and on 228, 50,000 or 50,000 needs to be crossed out.
And I just hate to see an excess being built up year after year, potentially. The superintendent, I would say that should be a shall on 225. And that's it. Thanks for your patience.
So, do you want to make that motion, or does somebody want to make a motion of sending it back? Do we have to?
I'll move that we send R277-733 back to staff to address the questions brought up by committee members and to have it returned to committee next month.
The motion before the committee is to send R27733 back to you guys with amendments from, or questions and concerns from the committee and bring it back next month for review. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks so much for being here.
And I believe
one more.
The last agenda item is the youth in custody.
Oh, yes. So you're just going to
we want to do that exact same thing on that one.
Can we do that one now?
Yeah, let's do it now.
Go home.
Yeah. So that would be our 277-709.
Brian, I know where you live.
Yeah, you did that on purpose. Okay, Brian.
Judicious use of time.
Yes. Go ahead and talk to us about the youth in custody program.
So that one, I thought the plan is, and I'm sorry I couldn't be at Monday's meeting, but that we'll just continue this to March. Because there's some other...
There's quite a few amendments that we had talked about. So is that one we can just do the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I move that we hold this in committee. Or do you just want to hold it?
Can we just?
Do you want me to move to hold it, or do you want us to hold it?
We can just move to hold it.
Just say hold it.
Okay.
Okay. I move we hold this in committee.
Okay. So Jen.
Yeah. Can I just have some discussion on this?
Wait. Should the motion before the
motion
committee is to hold R27709 draft 2.
Okay. So I just have a question about this. So I have been listening to President Trump, and I've and I've gotten a letter about the First Step program, the First Step Act that was signed into law December 19th by President Trump. And the act was amended to specifically incorporate dyslexia and the screening for dyslexia of all federal prisoners during the prisoner intake process. So I just want to know if you folks were aware of that and if this rule would be an appropriate place to specify a dyslexia screening for these kids as they're coming in, these youth in custody kids.
So it's.
I don't know if they'd be considered state or if they're considered federal.
They're state. So these are the Department of Human Services has Juvenile Justice Services and the Division of Child and Family Services, and so you have youth in Utah that are brought into state custody primarily with those two agencies. And so this is all a state custody issue. It's not federal. It's not. Very few are locked down in secure facility. A lot are in residential treatment centers. A lot are in foster homes. The majority are not locked up. They're not
federal,
like convicted felons.
Federal.
So I guess the point that they're making with this First Step program is that an awful lot of people who end up incarcerated are those that have learning disabilities in general, dyslexia specifically, and it also adds to recidivism issues. And so I thought, that sounds to me like something good that they're doing. I wondered if we were thinking along the lines of addressing it.
Maybe that bill that Jennifer has, right?
I don't know.
Difficulties.
Yeah.
Although that does not apply to, well, I guess it could apply to.
I don't know.
So YIC students are students of the district that they reside in whatever facility they might be in. And so they are required all right. So anything that we would require of any regular student applies to a YIC student. And so child find for special ed, assessments for difficulties, and YIC looks at common assessments. And so I think those would be addressed and found.
It says, so I'm looking at line 30, a program receiving a youth in custody student is responsible for obtaining the student's evaluation records and in cases where the records are not current, for conducting the evaluation, which may include a special education eligibility evaluation, as quickly as possible. So does that address the concerns about these kids having perhaps undiagnosed dyslexia issues?
And sorry to interrupt, but I'm wondering if Leah Voorhees could come to the table and kind of help us understand these concerns.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Leah Voorhees. You're all exactly right about the child find requirement. However, not all students who have dyslexia have a disability under IDEA, and that's one of the issues, Board Member Cannon. Because to be eligible to have a disability under IDEA, you have to pass the 3-prong test. You have to have a disability, one of the 13 disability categories outlined in IDEA, one of which is specific learning disability, which can encompass dyslexia. It has to interfere with academic and functional progress, and it has to require specially designed instruction and related services. And there are plenty of students who don't meet prong 3. So they have dyslexia, they would have a diagnosis, but not be eligible for special education under IDEA.
But as far as the 504 plan, though, would they qualify for that?
Yes, most likely would qualify for a 504 plan.
So we still have to I guess we don't have to find them.
Yeah, we don't have the child find requirement.
Yeah.
So if a parent or a student requested evaluation for 504 eligibility, but we don't have the child find requirement, and that is where universal screening becomes an issue, and why dyslexia advocacy groups are so vocal about universal screening, because there are students who are not eligible, whose parents don't request eligibility evaluation, and so it is a potential that those students don't receive the intervention, which leads to the conversation that we started with the previous rule about individuals having a high school diploma but reading below a ninth grade level. So that kind of all
a couple of those
goes together.
They're special ed kids.
So then back to what Carol was talking about, we might need something in this that says that we need to do the dyslexia screening if that applies.
Well, yeah. So these are state kids; they aren't federal kids. So that federal program doesn't apply. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an issue of dyslexia among this particular population.
So it's only tied to federal.
It's only tied to federal.
It's not tied to federal funds. It's federal.
Well, and last time I was at a youth in custody, and I still need to go out there because I got sick the day we were going to visit. But I went out 3 years ago, I think, to Decker Lake, and the majority of the kids out there were on IEPs.
Yeah.
But we do have to remember Brian's important delineation about not all students who are in custody end up in facilities.
That's true.
Since we have a motion before us, before the committee, is there any other discussion? Or I had some amendments, but I think you have those.
Yeah, they're in draft too.
Okay. Oh, yeah. And I'm wondering, since we're going to hold it and bring it back, I mean, as long as we vote for that, if people have other concerns, go ahead and send them to Jeff.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So we already have a motion. So the motion is to hold R277709 draft 2 until the March meeting. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thanks so much for your work, Will. Sorry that you feel better.
Getting better every day.
Oh. Last the best of all the game. Okay, so our last item, and it's an action item, is R277709. Oh, no.
We're Perkins.
We did it. It's the Perkins. So Perkins 5 was reauthorized in 2018. I'm sure Talia will tell us all about it. And you're just going to highlight kind of the changes, what's happening, and what we need to do. Correct. This is an information item. We don't even have to take action on it. Take your time. No. Just kidding. Just kidding. That was from the net. Take your time. Walk us through the.
We have about 100-slide presentation.
Oh, I'm so excited. I mean, we cut it down to 50.
Buckle up. We have chocolate.
Okay, take out your popcorn, everyone.
Yeah. I just need Chicago popcorn. That cheese and caramel.
Here's virtual. There you go. Okay.
That's not funny.
Talia Longhurst, I'm the Director for Career and Technical Education here, and I brought with me Wendy Morton, who's one of our CT coordinators, whose one of her main responsibilities is Perkins, all things Perkins. As Chair Gravitt said, summer of 2018, Congress and the President reauthorized the Carl Perkins Act. The new act is called the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act. Our working title, because that is far too long to remember, is Perkins 5.
That's good.
Perkins has been a federal law and a federal program for 101 years now.
Oh, wow.
So back in, what year is this? So back in 1917, Congress first authorized the Vocational Education Act and put money towards that. It's continued every year. I've been through, this is my third round of Perkins authorizations, where I've actually had to think about it and not just know about it as a teacher, but to do something about it. Hopefully this will be my last. It is a lot of work, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. What we wanted to do today is just to briefly highlight some of the changes that you can expect to see with Perkins 5, as well as the things that will be happening over the course of the next few months, as well as the next year, because you all will have a responsibility for approving some things as we submit things up to our partners at OCTAE in the Federal Department of Education. So you have a handout in your board docs. We tried to really summarize just some of the most important things. I'll let Wendy hit on a couple of those points, and we're happy to answer as many or as few questions. I'll hold my 100-slide presentation for you.
Oh, no, for the end.
Oh, for the end.
Yes, I'll be here.
So I think one of the main highlights that you're going to want to look at is the timeline. So one of the first things that we'll be working on this spring is a transition plan. So currently we are accepting Carl Perkins funds under Perkins 4. And so because we are accepting those currently, we have funds that we're using in our office, and we have a current plan that we've been using for a number of years. So with this new reauthorization, we will be going through a process to create a transition plan. That transition plan is still out for public comment at the federal level, so we don't know exactly what it will look like, but it looks like it will be a very brief, very, I don't know what to call it, short and sweet sort of plan. There's not going to be a lot of requirements associated with it for the transition year. And then in next spring, in 2020, we will have to submit our 4-year plan. And with that plan, one of the big changes with Perkins 5 is the secretarial authority. That's something that you guys, so previously the OCTAE, our federal partners, was able to look at our plan and they could review it and determine whether or not they thought it was satisfactory. And they would set our targets for our outcomes that we have to work on. But in this new transition plan, they've actually removed that authority. We have to go through a significant amount of stakeholder engagement and feedback, and what the state decides to submit, they have to accept. And so it will be up to us in Utah to determine what that plan looks like, which is very different than what we've experienced in the past in many of our other federal plans.
Seems like a good
so
shape.
It's very different. Mm-hmm. We will be able to, as a group, look at our data, present some information, and be able to set our own targets, be able to decide what Utah is going to do with these funds. So it will be different, and there will be lots of opportunity for stakeholder engagement in the process, because it is a requirement. Actually, they've set that as a requirement so that the secretarial authority could be removed.
Doesn't look like it is.
We continue on with pathways in CTE. They're actually going to be a little bit more robust. They're requiring components with post-secondary partners. In the past, we could choose to do that or not, but there's a requirement for articulations with higher education, both technical colleges and USHE institutions. So those will be options. We have them now, but they've just been things we've been doing, so I don't know that that'll be a big difference, but something that they've added. We'll have the opportunity to do some incentive grants at our office. Currently, we're allowed to withhold 10% of the funds to do incentive grants for new and innovative projects within career and technical education. Currently, we withhold about 7%. In our office, we will have the ability, if we choose to hold up to 15% for those types of grants. There's a needs assessment, which is very different. So the state will have to create a template for a needs assessment, and then each of the LEAs or grant recipients, because this does include higher education, they will have to perform a needs assessment, and then their funding, their spending within those plans and in their local applications will have to align with their needs. So however their needs assessment comes out, then the funds will then be allocated towards whatever the community has determined the needs are. So also different than they have done in the past. They have not had to do that. I think those are the main highlights. I don't know. There's a few other points on here, but I don't need to read the whole page to you guys. So, do you have questions?
We have questions. Those seem like some good changes to me.
It is exciting to see the changes.
We talked about course end classes, qualification testing. I forget what they.
Yeah, skill certification testing.
Any connections with certification testing with the Perkins?
So it is one of the quality indicators that we can use in our plan. Mm-hmm. So there are some program quality indicators that we will identify within a plan, and part of that is could be skill certification. So some sort of certificate that a student may earn at the end of a program or throughout a program. Some of those certifications like stack on top of each other, and so they work together. Others are sort of culminating types of certifications, and we would be able to use those as a quality indicator to see maybe students are doing very well in a program. Maybe industry really wants that particular type of certification, and so we would be able to use those for quality purposes.
So there would be some benefit.
Yeah, there would be some benefit.
Were not to opt out in order to take those tests and pass them, I guess.
Potentially, I mean, either way, we obviously have students opt out now, right? And we still are able to use that information of how well students are scoring on those. It just really depends on the direction that the board decides to go with that.
So if all the potential low scorers opt out, then
it doesn't really seem to happen that way. In all honesty, these are opportunities for students, because when they do earn them, then they are able to take them to an industry and show what they know. Right? Yeah. It's a little bit different. So I think students maybe sometimes opt out. May not opt out of this, but then sometimes they do. It just happens.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So if I can just add one final wrap-up comment, you will see us come back. Probably not. We were hoping that we could have a transition plan draft for you to review next month. Okay. But because literally today the guideline from Octave went out for another 30-day public comment review period. So we won't know exactly what that will look like. We have a pretty good idea, but they'll still make some tweaks to that. So you'll probably see us back in April with a draft transition plan, and then that will have to go to the full board in May to be approved to meet our May deadline. End of May deadline. That's good. So just a quick timeline.
So it'll be just in time.
Barely.
Yeah, that'll be exciting.
Barely.
Yeah. Oh, very exciting.
Yeah, taking all the slack out on there.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your hard work. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Motion
Let's
to
have
adjourn. I think I'm going to suck that back. Linda, do you have a motion to adjourn?
Can we please adjourn? I move we adjourn.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Well,
you guys, we are officially the committee of the 10 process.
I know, 10-step process.
The 10-step process. You can all get that tattooed on your now it's 10 steps. You made that.
Yay. Sorry.
Linda, you were making me laugh. You were
sorry. I was going to the legislature. It made me like.
Oh, is that where you were?
Yeah. I had to go speak to the safety bill for the board. I don't know. Well, I talked to the appropriations chairs after, one of which is Jeff Moss. And I was like, oh, you guys need to pay for this themselves. I'm like, oh, you guys don't give us it? Yeah. Yeah, they said they can, he and Representative Lass said they can run for it. So I'm hoping it'll be okay.
The real test.
I understand their point of view. I do understand their point of view.
Thank you.
They're trying to stay here.
Very nice. It's always interesting.
It's exciting. See the process. Actually being outside and walking and not sitting in all those idling cars as I am about the safety aspects.
I have an email about counseling.
How are you, Linda?
Lisa, you
are you going to full standards changes? Oh my goodness. I'm so glad to get home at 9:30 and do that.
I had kind of but then
that's why they will change.
Have that,
Tonight I'm staying on
review and
Just I agree with you. The journalism part of it.
So, like right now with the standards, you have that. But it wasn't even there. Now it's happening. You understand.
I understand.
Thank you. And I won't make you talk about it.
All of us. It's just burden for those who are listening in, who want to know, who want to just have an idea.
Right. But then I guess I would say they could go to any of the right, and they will know eventually. I can see it both ways. But now that is a point. And you were talking about but if I told you, you're going to crash tonight, girl. Yeah, I love that.
You can say, compared to all the other stuff, we have this one.
I don't think she's the root of me.
I like little meetings, but I'll go with
I haven't read it yet, but I also got
maybe one presents.
So do you want me to select those?
I would love that.
I thought so, because I haven't really had a chance to. In general, I always felt
The resolution.
I didn't have she's a social media member. She said what we were doing is we're a library that's open space. And we have district policies. And she's somebody, again, I read closely to copyright dates of 80 and 90. Mostly those were just things like things about Pluto, for example. You know, things that had changed. She said we didn't throw them out. That was the thing that we needed to work to see if they were still, especially the
And they were on the ballot.
which, so again, I haven't read it closely, but I know I got 2 pretty long emails. I'll forward to you. And I would love to hear your take. No,
I will, yeah.
because I know our library too, like Shondell, she has to make room for 2 books. Because we're not a library in the traditional sense of like a library, like the hunting room.
Next to
Next
to Incredible Journey.
I love Incredible Journey.
When I was in middle school, I hand drew a poster.
Laura Eagles Wilder and Incredible Journey were my favorites.
But they lost their size more in the flyers.
No, we still have them.
I know.
But I know they have.
Right now,
I felt